Want to thank everybody for being a part of the DeKalb Chambers Workforce and Education Summit. We are so excited to have just wrapped up our our first session, which had a very esteemed group of leaders and stakeholders within the county that serve in many capacities. And so we are also very fortunate to have some of those same individuals, as well as a new individual on this panel to talk about higher education and the pandemic. My name is Irvin Clark. I am the Vice President for Economic Development at Georgia Piedmont Technical College. And I am going to be your moderator today for today's session on higher education and the pandemic. As we all know, higher education has been impacted by the pandemic, and DeKalb County is fortunate to have several higher education institutions within the county, and all these institutions have been impacted by the pandemic in some way. And so we have a very strong panel of leaders that will be able to talk to us today about how their institutions have been impacted by the pandemic, and dig a little deeper in terms of some of the specific issues that they're dealing with and how they have been able to transition through that. And so we're going to kick off this panel discussion with allowing for our panelists to introduce themselves and also answer a question on how the pandemic has transformed both your institution and higher education. And so we can start with Ms. Kropf from Georgia State University Perimeter College.
Well, good morning again, everyone. I'm Nancy Croft. I'm the Dean of College, and Perimeter, if you weren't on the first session, is the two-year access college at Georgia State. 5 years ago, we merged, Georgia Perimeter College merged with Georgia State University. Georgia State is now the largest institution in the state and one of the largest in the country. My college, Perimeter College, as it's called now, has about 15,000 students by itself. So we're a decentralized college with 5 different campuses. And how it's changed us, the pandemic, first of all, we had to pivot very quickly to a new teaching methodology, going mostly online. It also was something where we had to think about safety protocols in 5 different locations with 5 different communities. And sadly, one of the, I think, points of pride of my college was the connection to the community and the kind of partnerships that we established. And unfortunately, excuse me, because of the pandemic, we've had to close our campuses to our community partners. So the kinds of programs that we would offer in conjunction with the partners in our communities, we've had to put it on hold for a year. And I think we're all feeling that loss. So we're looking forward to resurrecting those relationships and bringing you back to our college.
Great. Thank you. And how has the pandemic, in your view, transformed higher education in general?
Well, I think, again, we're really looking at, what it means to provide education in multiple modalities. And even though we taught online for a number of years, few of our students took all online classes. They would take maybe 1 class or 2 classes. When you're doing everything remote, it's a very different experience. And I think that's part of what higher education has to grapple with is there a good formula? Is there a sweet spot for allowing access, but also having the kind of connecting activities that happen when people are on campus, when they're building networks with their instructors and with their peers, and some of the leadership opportunities that are really hard to do virtually. We are mounting an ambassador program where we teach our students how to interact with our community partners, with our donors and our friends, because those are skill sets. How do you do that virtually? So I think higher ed is really grappling with not just teaching, but what are these other skills that we impart and how do we do that in a virtual environment?
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Karen Goff, thank you so much for being a part of this discussion. Same question, introducing yourself and tell us about how higher education has been transformed as well as your institution.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dr. Clark. It's certainly my pleasure to be with all of you and the esteemed panelists. I certainly want to bring greetings from Agnes College, the #1 most innovative liberal arts college in the country. And so that is a point of pride for us. And certainly we recognized by U.S. News and World Report as number one also for first year experience because of our innovative summit curriculum. Having said that, I also want to acknowledge and recognize my president, Leokeda Isaac, who has given me the opportunity to participate in today's panel. How has the pandemic transformed higher education? Well, let me start there. When I look at the pandemic, I look at it in a larger context. Some people refer to it as the twin pandemic. Not only are we wrestling with COVID-19 as a pandemic, but as we saw throughout the summer, and even as we continue to grapple with the inequities and the issues and the matters around social justice and racism and raising people's social consciousness. So we are not dealing with the pandemic in isolation or in a silo. We are dealing with the pandemic, I think, that has exacerbated and bring to the forefront all of which we knew the inequities in higher education. So I think when we look at transformation, one of the things I think it has done for us is to call us back to our consciousness and our value-centric education that we deliver. And our students are expecting that and holding us accountable. The other transformation that we've seen, many of us, of course, have had experience in the online area and the platform. But if anyone works in higher education, we don't always move as quickly as the rest of the world. And so I think the most profound impact was to be able to reveal that we can actually be agile and we can be nimble, we can pivot, and we can deliver what it is that our students are expecting from us. And as Nancy said, part of what we have to now examine is the kind of modalities that we're able to deliver the education to our students. For us at Agnes Scott, more specifically, in the last spring when we had to quickly transition to fully online, we know that there were a lot of issues that we encountered there. And again, a big part of that was really showing the disparity among some of our students. When they're on our campus, it's kind of an equal playing field and what I call an equalizer, right? So everybody's pretty much living in the same residence halls. They have access to the same resources. And so you're not able to see as much all of the inequities in access to technology. And so that is what we have been able to do at Agnes Scott after the spring semester, really reset, did a lot of training, examine our practices, being more flexible. We're teaching students across time zones. Some of our students are international, West Coast, East Coast. And so all of those things, I think, has transformed higher education. And I think it's here to stay for us to examine our business model and how we deliver the best of what we have going forward.
Great. Thank you so much for that, Ms. Goff, and I totally agree with you. Next up, my boss and our leader, Georgia Piedmont, Dr. Tavarez Holston, same question.
First of all, I just need to acknowledge that I actually work for Dr. Clark and our colleagues. I'm here to support. I know my place in the hierarchy. And so it's always a pleasure to serve with colleagues. I feel really good sitting on a panel with Drs. Goff and Croft. We're all in this together. And there's so much that the pandemic has revealed. Specifically for Georgia Piedmont Technical College, our whole mission, everything that we do hinges upon this concept of workforce development. I was once told by my boss when I was hired for this job that every help wanted sign in DeKalb, Newton, and Rockdale counties was my responsibility. And so what that means is the onus is on me, on those who work alongside me here at the college to make sure that there's a workforce that's trained and skilled and ready to go to work. And in fact, our students get to work once they graduate from us. We have a 99.8 job placement rate, and we train skilled workers anywhere from building automation, engineers, automation and robotics, criminal justice, nursing, the list goes on and on and on. And our graduates, they land jobs coming out of our programs anywhere starting from $16 to $27 an hour starting with zero debt. So that's kind of what we do. And, in thinking about our mission and the impact that we have on our communities as it goes towards workforce, we really have had to pivot and think differently. I think my colleague just talked about how, higher ed isn't necessarily known for being nimble. Where our businesses, they turn on a dime. And so I think what that is showing us, there's a lot of discussion in the higher ed community about how do we make this shift and offer quality education and distance through a distance and remote learning. That was the challenge. But I think, as it's already been mentioned, it shows us our capacity. When we have a lot of smart people working out in higher ed, we can use all of those degrees and all that brain power to overcome even things in the midst of challenge. And so, for us, it's just really the pandemic has really showed us some spots where we need to shore up. It's challenged us to look at our processes, how we serve students. At the center of everything we do is students. So how do we get students access to the services, to the education that we provide? A lot of times technology is a barrier. For our students, transportation is a barrier. Childcare is a barrier. So when our K-12 partners aren't teaching kids in an in-person environment, the majority of our students have children and other adult responsibilities. So it's really forced us to think about who our student is and connect our student to access to the resources, connect them to accesses to employers so that we can come together and make those connections so they can get those jobs that are rewarding and they can answer that question and they can become what they've always wanted to be since they started this journey called education. Great.
Thank you so much for that, Dr. Holston. And I want to build on something you said about workforce development and more specifically employers, and want to present a question to Dr. Croft and Dr. Goff. How have you been, and I'll start with Dr. Croft, how have you engaged employers and key stakeholders in the communities that you serve, the industries that you serve, to ensure that there's still a seamless connection, that they know that you're here, and that you're responding to their needs?
Thank you for that question. And before I answer that, I want to add to Dr. Goff's discussion or talk about, Agnes Scott, and congratulations for your U.S. News and World Report. And our county should be proud of us because Georgia State is also in the U.S. News Report. We are the third highest ranked for undergraduate education for higher education. So not only does DeKalb County have Agnes Scott, but they also have Georgia State. So for the taxpayers of the area, know that when you send your students to us, they're getting a great undergraduate education. So how do we engage our partners and industry to make sure that we are really looking at the end point of having our students come in and leaving us career ready? There's a few ways. One is that we have really taken this as an opportunity because higher education has been in the mindset of individuals during this pandemic to really look at our board of advisors. And I'm delighted to say that my senior director of development is on this webcast today. And we've really punched out, we've really expanded what our board of advisors should be doing for us and can be doing for us, because in many ways, they're the connection to our 5 different communities and beyond. And we've really spent some time tending to those individuals who want to affiliate with us. The second thing that actually I did pre-pandemic, but it's paid out in dividends, is I took one of the associate dean positions in our college that was responsible for some other parts of our college areas and redirected it to be an associate dean for workforce development and external relations. So I've really seated in that individual the responsibility for creating those kinds of partnerships. And I'm pleased to say that over the past probably 12 months, we've been able to establish closer relationships with State Farm, who's up on 285 and 75 to do some workforce development with people who are already in the workforce. So we're promoting a certificate plus certificate equals degree program for their existing workers. Emory Healthcare has partnered with us with their existing LPNs to move them from an LPN to a BS in nursing. So we're really looking at those ways Not just how can we tell you about what we're doing, but how can we do it with you? And I think that's vitally important as we look at upgrading skill capacity in the labor force during these times.
Yeah. Thank you for that. Thank you. Dr. Goff?
I think that's an excellent question. Agnes Scott is a liberal arts college. I'm the product of a liberal arts graduate. So a lot of times, when we talk about the liberal arts, people do not always connect the liberal arts directly with workforce development. And I think that is a disservice. One of the things I am so proud of that we've been able to do at Agnes Scott is recognize that they're not independent of each other, but they're integrated with each other. And so as we look at the research, and more of our students that are coming to us and our parents are asking us, what are your outcomes? And by outcomes, they're meaning asking plain and simple, is my kid going to be able to get a job when they graduate from your college? I am proud to say that at Agnes Scott, over 90% of our students who apply to graduate school are accepted and go on to thrive. But also many of our students, 85% or so, who apply to meaningful jobs for our students actually are able to go on and contribute to the workforce. One of the things that we are currently investing in as we launch our new strategic plan, and I will say this is one of the things that President Zach did and really brought to the forefront when she joined us a few years ago at Agnes Scott, was really begin to ask us about exactly that, careers and outcomes. And so one of our key focus right now is on professional success. You asked also a very direct link. We just started a new initiative last year known as Scale, which is our sophomore class Atlanta leadership experience. And part of what we do is partner with community partners in the community and connect our students so they can, in fact, begin to, shadow, experience, see what is happening in the workforce, go with a leader for a day, and also be able to offer their service. So they're both providing service, but they're also learning from real life experiences. And over the next coming years, that is a key strategic direction for Agnes Scott, focusing on our students' professional success.
Great. Yeah. And I agree with both your points that both you, Dr. Goff, and Dr. Croft made about workforce development, connecting with employers, keeping those individuals engaged with our faculty and staff. But, beyond those things that we have to do, and this question is for all of you, but I'll start with Dr. Holston. I want to talk a little bit about our students on campus, retention, graduation, completion, and how are you managing that? And how are your staffs managing that as relates to the pandemic? And, what best practices are you doing or challenges that are happening within that space? Dr. Holston?
Now, why would you ask such a difficult question? Thanks for letting me go first. So basically, I think a lot of this is centered around, not a lot, pardon me. Everything that we do is centered around who our students are. And understanding who our students are, I think I mentioned this in the last session. Our students are typically first generation college students. Our students are 70% people of color. Over 70% of them receive Pell, which means they're low income. I didn't bring the stats. A large number of them are taking care of children or their parents, or they have other responsibilities. So our students, our learners, they're bringing all of this into the learning experience. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that as educators, especially during hard times like a pandemic. How do we help students get access to education? And I'll say, and actually, I think a couple of days ago, it was reported in the AJC that for technical colleges, enrollment is actually down system-wide. And we've experienced that as well. And I think understanding that our students, and I'll speak specifically about Georgia Piedmont students, they're having difficulty just trying to provide for their families, keep the lights on. And so we're all very well aware that, a lot of nonprofits, when it comes to try to raise funds to support students, giving us down, because this pandemic has just decimated our economy and the way that we go about living and working and that sort of thing. So, we're constantly talking about how do we help those students access, because what I can tell you is our applications are up compared to last year by about 8 to 9%. So it's telling me that students still want to come and continue their education, but they're just having a hard time accessing funds. And for our students, there's been a lot of talk about CARES. All of the higher ed institutions received CARES funding. We took a large portion of that, distributed that to the students. A lot of our students, that still doesn't cover rent and living expenses and all of these other things. So, the things that we're looking at as a college is how do we take funding from whatever source it may be, get technology into the hands of those students? How do we make sure that funds from our foundations and nonprofits can help them get to their childcare in a very expeditious manner? Because it is a challenge trying to go to college, especially if you don't have someone to kind of guide you through that experience. You're the first in your family to try to navigate what I believe is a lot of bureaucracy, just trying to get registered, trying to get a class in banner. That is an ordeal for a student who's never experienced that, or doesn't have someone to guide them. So we're looking at ways of how do we, I guess people say, handhold students. Sometimes students need their hands to be held to walk them through if they don't have anyone else to do it. And the onus is on us as educators to help them navigate our land. So I think, did I answer the question, Dr. Clark?
Yes, you did, sir. Thank you for that. And, to Dr. Goff, same question: recruitment, retention, completion. How's Georgia State University managing that?
Yeah, like President Holston said, we actually are down credit hours this spring. We're down about 16% compared to last year. And unfortunately, we're having fewer students come to us. Again, these are students, like Dr. Holston described, that are really facing the pandemic in the hardest way. Socially, they may have lost jobs. They're caring for children. They're caring for older parents and family members. And trying to again, hold down credit hours is a very, very tough road. So not only are we down students, but our students are taking fewer credits per semester. For us, it's really there's two big issues that I'm working on right now. One is how do we keep students going forward in higher education? So that, again, retention issue. And so we're building some new structures at the university and specifically at Perimeter College to keep students going. We had high what's called DFW rates, and that basically means either failing out of a class, not getting credit for it, or withdrawing in our fall semester classes, especially our first year students. It increased about 8%. So for me is, how do we get those students who need to retake classes to do it in the most sort of expeditious way so they don't lag a whole year to graduation? So we're building different kinds of semesters this summer. We're also going to be building different semester structures in the fall. So instead of 15 weeks, for example, those classes where you need to progress, having 2 7-week courses, and then adding what I would call, from a social work perspective, those kind of wraparound services, supplemental instruction, tutoring, check-in. Is one of the things that we found that we thought, we'll know how students are doing in their classes because we'll go into the learning management system, the online system, and see, are students clicking in? Are they going to their classes online? And we actually had high engagement rates in the 90s. And then students weren't getting good grades. So we looked at how long were students staying in their learning management systems, and they weren't. So they'd go in, they'd click in, and what we suspect is they'd look at the assignment and say, I'm not doing that, and they'd click out. So under a minute check-ins were really sort of the norm for those students who didn't pass the class. So we're also tagging those early alert systems of if students are not clicking in, or clicking in and not staying to do their assignments, they get an intervention. An advisor reaches out to them and says, what's going on? What do we need to help? Do you need different technology? Do you need some, motivation? Do you need to have some tutoring because you're not understanding it? So those are important parts as well, is really taking the student where they are and providing those supports to keep them progressing.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Dr. Goff?
I would say very similar answers. At Agnes Scott, 60% of our students identify as students of color, and another 42% or so are students who are Pell eligible. And so we have been very, very intentional in understanding the barriers that some of our students come with. When you talk about first generation students who've not previously had a model, or they haven't had anyone who either gone to college or graduated from college to help them navigate our system. So we try to simplify things and, as Dr. Holston said, remove these bureaucratic barriers and help our students to get to what they need. Some of the things that we've just done that I think have really boosted us in terms of retention, we have about an 87% first year to second year retention rate, which is far above the national average, which hovers around 60 or so percent. And our graduation rate is about 70% as well. But still a lot of work to do. What we would like to see is 100%. They start with us, they finish with us. And one of the things we have is what we call a board of advisors. So all of our students really have professional advisors. We call them summit advisors. It was a part of the summit initiative that really pretty much handhold students and help them to navigate the path. And it's not but just about picking or choosing a class, but really having meaningful conversations with students about where they see themselves, what would they like to do. Another thing we've just done is every student is receiving a career coach. And so they've broken that down into different areas. So if you want to go on a pathway in the sciences, then you have a career coach that specializes in that area. If you're in the arts and humanities, or if you're in business and so forth. So all of these very tangible initiatives, I think, are what have been helping our students to persist. Additionally, we recognize that learning for our students is beyond just what the content they're receiving in the classroom. And especially when you're dealing with a population that has such a high first generation, low socioeconomic background and stuff, the wraparound services are just as important. So, you hear about tutoring. We have a wonderful Center for Writing and Speaking. Just this past, in the pandemic, we have faculty members who have reached out individually to students. We also have an early alert system. So if you see that a student has not logged into your class within the first or 2 weeks, then you're reporting that. And so someone else is following up. Another challenge with some of our students that are coming, at least as Agnes Scott, it's around medical and mental health challenges. So making sure that we have services that are easily accessible to them. So we've now implemented telemental and medical health, so that no matter where our students are, they can easily access a counselor, have someone be able to talk to them about some of the mental health challenges that they may be facing, because some of those things are the very barriers and the inhibitors that keeps them from being retained and persisting. So I do think the wraparound services and the academic support are integral to our student success.
Great. Yeah. And the theme that I'm hearing is that recruitment, retention, and completion are critical to all of our institutions, because all of our institutions serve as access points for students who want to be successful and obviously graduate, contribute to our communities. And so having that at the forefront is going to be critically important. Want to shift and talk a little bit about those individuals who help support recruitment, retention, and completion, and specifically about your faculty and staff. And what are they experiencing during this pandemic, and how are they responding to it? So Dr. Holston, I'll start with you. How has your faculty and staff at the college dealt with the pandemic, and how they're responding to it to support such activities as retention, recruitment, and completion of students?
I think you asked two different questions. So how is faculty and the staff responding, and then how are they responding in support of our students. Am I understanding the questions correct? Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
So I will say, how are faculty and staff handling the pandemic? I'll say just like the rest of the world. We're uncertain. We're trying to figure it out. We're trying to balance some sense of mental health and saneness while carry on the normal business of life. I remember, I guess it was last week, a week prior, I was speaking with a group of our emerging leaders. And one of the things, we brought in a therapist just to kind of talk through, let's talk through what you're thinking and how to manage stress in your day to day. And it was the most well-received session that we've had. And I think for me, that kind of shook me to a degree that made me think, how are my people doing? I'm sorry, I have a phone call coming up. Give me. Sorry about that. Didn't turn off the ringer. So it got me to thinking, how are my people really doing on a personal level? So, as a leader, I'm thinking about how can I provide support? Because we have services for students. That's always the first place we go. We have services they can access virtually, via phone call, all these different ways, but, and that's available to our faculty and staff. But it's really got me thinking, because I can't walk the halls like I like to do and say, how you doing, Doc? What's going on? How are you feeling? I can't do that when we do that in virtual formats. And it's hard to get very personal and intimate in a group setting like this to say, how are you? And really have some candidacy in that. So, I think that our faculty and staff are handling that just like the rest of the world. I think they can identify with the students. I think that's the part that I've been most encouraged by is the humanity of it all. Is our faculty seeing students as people who are trying to improve themselves, and so I can hear it as I'm kind of walking through the hallways as we have some limited walk-in traffic. I hear a lot more grace and empathy, trying to understand the student. How can I help you? Not just how can I help you, but okay, after you give me the answer that you want to give me, digging a little bit deeper. So I think those are the things that bring me encouragement. And, earlier I talked about extending grace to people, especially during these types of times, just understanding that we're all trying to navigate it. So I think it's given us a more humanistic, holistic approach in the way that we serve our students and serve our community. Did I answer both questions?
Yes,
Okay.
you did. Yeah. I apologize. Dr. Croft, same question in terms of faculty and staff and how are they managing the pandemic?
Yeah, similar to what President Holston said, I am concerned about our faculty and staff, and I think they've done a great job. When I look at metrics for productivity for our college, I'm really proud to say that we haven't decreased. Everything that we're supposed to do to keep the boat or the airplane, whatever Superintendent Duday said before, whatever we're supposed to keep floating or flying, we're doing. But, we've had a number of sadnesses in our college this year. We've had faculty members who, are not coming back, who died, that we've had to say goodbye to. We've had students. Some are pandemic related where they've, contracted COVID, but others are because of situations that aren't related to COVID. People are not going into regular healthcare visits because, we've changed whether you can go and see healthcare providers. And so we've experienced in the last year a number of deaths, and that does take a toll on people's, feelings about being part of the community. So, as I think about what's my role as a leader, I'm trying to be as visible and connected to our faculty and staff and students as possible. Within the last 2 weeks, I've set foot on all 5 campuses, just basically walking the campus, seeing who's there, saying hello, making sure that the environment is safe for people to be there. So if we didn't have the right kind of signage still on the wall because someone took it down, to make sure that we have it be a safe environment. Those are things that I can do and I think are really incumbent and important for leadership to do during this time. The recruitment issue, I just want to touch on that because it's been tricky. It's been very tricky during these times. You know, our college had the largest dual enrollment program in the state. And that has been something that it's been hard to keep those numbers up, to be able to connect with high school counselors. You know, students are not wanting to take on more responsibility for very real reasons. So that's been a pipeline that we have not been able to actualize like we have in the past. So, you know, again, looking at other streams into our college, and we're really developing our commitment to workforce development and the kind of partnerships to get existing workers into our classes for skill development, but even beyond that, for degree completion. And so that's something that we continue to really prioritize as we move forward.
Thank you so much for that. Dr. Goff?
Similarly, recruitment for us certainly has been a challenge this year. Our counselors are not on the road and traveling as they were previously. Students are not coming to campus to visit. And we know that for us, that is a huge yield effort for Agnes Scott. So certainly they've had their challenges, but I've also been encouraged by the level of creativity that I have seen from our enrollment folks, and being able to still try to deliver virtually some of the experiences that they have previously, so our students can get a sense and a feel for the Agnes Scott community. Now, Agnes Scott being a small community, going to your next question, I think more than anything else, it really has shown just how magical and special that place is. We really do. There's a deep sense of care and compassion. And I will say, as a leader of leaders, one of the things that, I've had to do as well is to be able to shift and understand that we are not operating in anything like normal times. And so I like the word grace, and these are oftentimes, words you don't hear in this sector, as much. We're so focused on the output and the outcome, and certainly that's important. But one of the things I've observed is just being authentic. With the people that I lead, show them my vulnerability as a leader. I have lost someone, a dear aunt, during the pandemic. Being able to share that and the impact, the profound impact that had, the fact that this happened earlier on in the pandemic and you can't go and necessarily see your loved one, or being able to assemble with your family, and suddenly you are having a Zoom memorial service. And so, just being very sensitive to the people around you. I think we have shown up so well for each other as a community. One of the things that we started at Agnes Scott was we have a BIPOC group, Black, Indigenous, and people of color, who meet, regularly on afternoon, just to be able to talk about not just COVID-19 and the impact that it's had, but all of the racial traumas and the things that, they are taking in every day. You turn on the news and so forth, and it really takes a toll on individuals, and let them know that we do understand that. We've also held grief groups so that not only faculty and staff, but even our alumni, we hosted a grief group, and I was surprised by the number of people that showed up for that grief group, just to be able to be in community with people and to be able to connect and say, I understand, I see you, I want to validate your experiences. Working from home for faculty, many of them, this is their first time. And so suddenly there is not that clear demarcation between, home life and school life, and you're managing children or you're doing elder care, and your students are experiencing that. And, the lines get blurred. There's this is not the time I start, and this is not the time I end. People are invited into your homes, and some people are like, why, they're not necessarily comfortable turning on their cameras because you don't know what their home situations are like. So one of the things that I have learned during this time, and I have learned to cherish and so pleased to see among our community, is just that the sense of community that we have created and the sense of belonging that everyone really realizes, and it's cliche, but it's true, that we're all in this together. And this pandemic has really kind of leveled the field to say, this sector doesn't get impacted and this, is exempt. We really are in this together. And so we have to find solutions that work for all of us.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And thank you to all of you for your responses. We have about 2 minutes left, and I just want to do a wrap-up question to each of you. If you could take about 30 seconds or so to answer it. Just want to know, post-pandemic, when we do get to that point, how different will your institutions look? And what do you expect to see moving forward that, the people who are listening to this session may find different than what they expected before the pandemic started? I'll start with Dr. Holston.
I'll just say the thing that I see changing for post-pandemic is that our education has to be more modular. I'm thinking about learning in chunks. Because I know when people come out of the pandemic, they're going to be looking to get to work, and they don't want to sit in class for 15 weeks. They're looking for ways, how can I upskill very quickly and get to work? And so that's one of the challenges that I put forward to my team, like one of those members who are on this panel moderating, is how do we make education modular and just in time for people?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for that. Dr. Goff?
I think we're post-pandemic, we just have to get the mindset that we'll never return to being the same. We really have to look at how we deliver, our services to students, and we'll be able to look at multiple forms of delivery, and whether that's academic support or student services or in the classroom, the one size fits all no longer works.
Great, thank you. Dr. Croft?
Yeah, because of a painful route, we had a budget cut on top of the pandemic. So my college by itself reduced our budget by $3.4 million. And that's a painful process, but it also made us focus on efficiency. And so what I'm hoping is that when we're post-pandemic, we are a more efficient operation. Things that we can do, again, with different realignment of resources are things that this pandemic had to force us to look at. And so I think that's the silver lining of creativity and rearranging resources.
Great, thank you. And I just want to thank all three of you for being on this panel today. I think it was a very informative discussion. I learned a lot about your institution, Georgia State, and Agnes Scott, and even about some things about Georgia Piedmont. So just very fortunate, and hope that our guests who were able to participate enjoyed this panel as well. This session is being recorded, so you will be able to see this later on, but this panel has ended, and so you can go into your networking sessions, and the next session will start at 11:15 after the networking session. Thank you so much, Dr. Croft, Dr. Goff, and Dr. Holston for your time today.
It's been a pleasure, colleagues. Take care.
Thank you. Take care.
Stay safe.